So welcome everyone. My name's Allison Gibbs. I'm the director of the Center for Teaching Support and Innovation, and it's my real privilege to welcome you to the 2021 University of Toronto Teaching and Learning Symposium. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today and over the next few days as we explore this year's theme, Teacher as Learner, Learner as Teacher. And I'll now introduce Professor Mark Schmuckler, the Acting Vice Provost of Academic Programs and Innovations in Undergraduate Education, to officially open the symposium. Mark?
Thanks very much, Allison. Good morning, everyone, on this beautiful mid-May morning. My name is Mark Schmuckler. I'm the Acting Vice Provost, Academic Programs and Innovations in Undergraduate Education. I'm delighted to be here this morning as we all join together for the 2021 Teaching and Learning Symposium. This is the first year the symposium is being held as an online event. And while we're meeting today on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land on which the campus was built and which is the foundation from which we have formed our teaching and learning community. I wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. As an administrator at the University of Toronto, I recognize that it is part of my responsibility to improve Indigenous well-being on campus, which in turn helps the university meet its commitments to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Additionally, I would like to recognize the invaluable work of the First Nations House, the Office of Indigenous Initiatives, and other Indigenous peoples on campus who are changing the system for future generations. Finally, I would like to acknowledge our community partners and the many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island who live in Toronto. We are grateful for their diversity of cultural worldviews, their resiliency, their ties to the communities, and their education and connection they offer to our University of Toronto community. Now it is my real pleasure to introduce Merrick Gertler, President of the University of Toronto, who will officially welcome us all to this symposium. Merrick.
Thank you so much, Mark, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm so thrilled to be with this community. Let me start with a special thanks to the Center for Teaching Support and Innovation, and also to the Desautels Center for Integrative Thinking for organizing and hosting U of T's 14th annual Teaching and Learning Symposium, reimagined this year as a virtual event, as Mark just noted. Like many of you, of course, I was disappointed that last year's event had to be canceled. And I'm very pleased, but not surprised, to see the event emerge this year in its new virtual format. After all, resilience, creativity, innovation, dedication, and perhaps most of all, compassion have been hallmarks of this community from the beginning. And they have been especially evident over the past year as we face together one of the most difficult challenges in our university's nearly 200-year history. Now, nobody here needs reminding of this, but the scale of what you and your colleagues have accomplished over the past year is mind-blowing. We all remember that famous weekend in March of 2020 when we shifted 6,300 courses online. And that verb shift hardly does justice to the extraordinary effort involved in creating what some have referred to as emergency remote teaching, basically overnight. That very big pivot set in motion a transformation of unprecedented dimensions and complexity, whose reverberations are still being felt today. Now consider that 2 years ago, the volume of online teaching activity across the university stood at roughly 5,600 course registrations. During the past year, online course registrations reached more than 500,000. So it's difficult to overstate the magnitude of this accomplishment. And you didn't just move the courses online, you did it brilliantly. You provided our students with unique, rigorous, stimulating, and caring remote learning experiences. The pedagogical creativity, imagination, and ingenuity that we've witnessed have all been sensational. So my first message this morning is thank you. I am so proud to be a part of U of T's teaching and learning community. Thank you for everything that you've done to support our students, to support one another, and to support the University of Toronto. Now, as we move out from the shadow of the pandemic, and hopefully soon, we will need to find ways to apply what we've learned during this crisis and to build on it, which is a nice segue to the theme of this year's symposium. After all, the pandemic has made us all learners. It's a very humbling experience. And while the process has often been difficult and at times even painful, it has also produced some incredible results. For example, the pandemic posed unique challenges to the commitment we made across the university, a commitment that was enshrined in our most recent strategic mandate agreement with the province, to scale up experiential learning opportunities. To meet this challenge, our community came together to offer a series of webinars and resources that were focused on offering high-quality remote experiential learning courses and programming during this academic year. These newly reframed learning opportunities are playing a crucial role in preparing our students to be engaged citizens who are well prepared to contribute in complex and evolving communities and work environments. We also saw divisions like the Faculty of Arts and Science establish an online learning academy for faculty members and instructors to share best practices and expertise around online teaching, instructors becoming students. And when it comes to our goal of internationalizing learning opportunities for our students, again, one of our most important institutional priorities, here too we have seen such impressive innovation. Everything from finding ways to help our students work effectively in remote teams whose members might be distributed across multiple time zones, to creating global classrooms that foster rich cross-cultural learning opportunities. And I know that there are dozens of similar examples on every one of our campuses across the university. I have just been astounded and so impressed by the innovation. U of T's educators have embraced learning, developing new approaches for helping students thrive, exploring alternate means of assessment and collaboration, adopting new tools to engage students, and designing and participating in accessible and equitable learning communities. And perhaps most importantly, teaching and learning at the University of Toronto are not only about the transmission of information or the development of key academic skills. They are also about being there for our students and for each other. We have all had to attend to our mental and physical well-being, take care of our students, ourselves, and one another. And in this way, you and your colleagues have done so much during the past year to create caring communities virtually. As we move through the next 3 days and learn more about creating and supporting unique learning experiences for all our students, we will be challenging ourselves with the symposium's theme, Teacher as Learner, Learner as Teacher. As you will shortly hear from Nouman Ashraf, our keynote speaker, the skills we relied upon this past year to think critically and creatively about our practice, those are the same skills we need to nurture in our students to help prepare them to face the challenges of an increasingly complex world. In closing, let me once again extend my thanks to this community for everything you do as teachers and learners in support of our students. U of T's teaching excellence continues to be reflected in our international ranking results, in which we regularly place among the top schools in the world for both research and teaching. And this success is due to the efforts, the ideas, the ingenuity of an engaged and active community of teachers and learners. So thank you for caring deeply about the quality of teaching and learning at U of T. It's because of your commitment to excellence that U of T is one of the world's truly great universities. And I wish you all a rewarding and successful 14th annual Teaching and Learning Symposium. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, President Gertler. It's now my honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Nouman Ashraf. Nouman is an assistant professor teaching stream within the organizational behavior area at the Rotman School of Management, where he's also the director of diversity and inclusion initiatives. And while he has a broad range of professional, academic, and teaching interests, he has a specialized focus on enabling inclusive and innovative practices within teams and organizations and boards. He's a recognized thought leader in governance. He's the winner of numerous teaching awards, and he teaches across all of Rotman's many programs, including courses in emancipatory leadership, leading social innovation, leading across differences. Nouman had been set to speak at the 2020 symposium, which of course was not to be. But the theme of teacher as learner, learner as teacher, which had been chosen for 2020, was maintained. And we're so grateful that Nouman stuck with us through the postponing of that symposium and the move now to this virtual format this year. And that theme, which would have also been so important in 2020, feels like it has become so much more relevant and resonant and meaningful in 2021. So we're grateful that Nouman was able to stick with us through this. On a personal note, I've been extremely fortunate to have the opportunity to interact with Nouman as we prepared for this symposium. And I can honestly say that each of our interactions has left me inspired and energized. Nouman will never allow us to end one of those interactions without sharing a reflection on the value of the time we've spent together. He truly lives and breathes our symposium theme. And I'm looking forward now to sharing some of his energy and inspiration and wisdom with you this morning. So Nouman, over to you.
Thank you very much, Alison. Good morning, everyone. As you've heard from President Gertler and Professor Alison Gibbs, my name is Nouman Ashraf. I have the great privilege and good fortune of being a professor here at the Rotman School. And when I say here, I mean virtually. This is a joint initiative of the Center for Teaching Support and Innovation, as well as the Center for Digital Center for Integrative Thinking. So I feel like I have a little bit of home court advantage, but I think all those advantages are kind of leveled as we think about how we're interacting online. So I want to, for those that are able to, please ask you to stand up, please. Stand up, stand up, stand up. We can? Yes? Jazz hands, jazz hands, jazz hands. Yes? We're gonna do a little bit of drumming. Are you ready? Do, 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 do. Slow, 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 slow. Fast, 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 fast. Slow, 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 slow. Fast, 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 fast. Slow, 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 slow. Fast, 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 slow, slow, slow. And all right, good. I want us to have a seat or keep standing, whatever you want to do. I just want to say that it's a long time. We're together till kind of 11 a.m. this morning. I also want to recognize that for some people, you may be in a different time zone. You may not be in Toronto or Ontario. You may be elsewhere. So I want to recognize the fact that we're all here to have a conversation. Sorry, what was that? Yeah, I know I catch not, okay, the tie. Yeah, okay, I get it. Okay, yeah, okay, yes, okay, good, yes, we're good, we're good. Thank you for that nonverbal communication. I think I get it. I get it. We don't have to make any more stuff than it needs to be. Very cool. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna have a bit of a conversation, because that's kind of how I roll. And I think it's important for us to have a conversation with really a goal in mind. So let's get started with that. I'm gonna share screen, which means it'll take me off of the spotlight here. And we are gonna go live. And thank you for the chat. I love the feedback. You think I'm hilarious? Just you wait, just you wait. Couple of very quick thank yous. I want to thank Alison Gibbs, Professor Alison Gibbs, the director at CTSI, and all of our team members, Kelly and Megan, and everyone else that's been just super instrumental in getting us here. I also want to acknowledge Professor Carol Rollheiser. And Carol and I had a conversation 2 years ago about this theme. And as you can tell, I'm a bit of a slow processor. So it took me 2 years to get here. So I'm happy to be here. I'm delighted to be here. I also wanted to build on Professor Mark Schmeckler's land acknowledgement. I am very fortunate. I consider myself very fortunate as someone who moved to Canada 30 years ago from the US to be able to work on this land, the traditional lands of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit, on which the University of Toronto operates. I can see Varsity Stadium from where I'm sitting. And colleagues and friends, I say this not simply because this is one of the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, but I actually think there's a more fundamental reason for us to be doing this every time that we start an initiative, an event, or a program. And that's this. See, for me, universities only exist for two reasons. Reason number one is knowledge creation. And reason number two is knowledge mobilization. And I don't believe that we can speak adequately either of knowledge creation or of knowledge mobilization unless and until we recognize the knowledge systems of the people who've come before us. I'm a professor of organizational behavior. I think about structures and systems and people and the ways in which we interact. But I don't think we can speak about leadership or organizational behavior unless I myself get on the journey to understanding what indigenous systems are, knowledge systems are, understanding what wisdom comes to us from our elders that we can integrate into our work. And it is so fitting, therefore, that we think about this idea of teacher as learner, learner as teacher in this space. So if you think about this, right, the work of reconciliation is massive, massive. It's multi-generational. It has colonial underpinnings. It has all of these things that impact us from way back. But I do think that our work, yours and mine, is in fact to take the learner mindset and say, what are some practices that I can actually take and make tangible? If you haven't had the opportunity, I highly recommend for you to please check out the resources at First Nations House. In my undergraduate course, which is called Leading Across Differences, I want to say to you that one of the highlights for my students is when we were able to go in person, we'd go to First Nations House, and even now virtually we do a tour. The Indigenous Initiatives Office is likewise an amazing resource. I urge us to embrace that. Okay, a couple of things. I don't think they're housekeeping things. They're kind of, hosting things, right? So I want to say to you, I recognize this is our reality, right? I can't remember. Do I work at home or do I live at work? And so I want to say to all of you, if you need to have your cameras off, I am not taking this personally at all. You do what actually works for you. If you've got pets or partners or family members or whoever needs your attention, go for it. Just go for it, please, right? My only ask is if you're having a snack with the camera on, tell us what you're eating, because we want to share the good stuff. I want to say to you that this is, for me, a special time of year. This is the last day of the month of Ramadan, the month of fasting. For those that are observing, I'm going to say to you, may you have a meaningful and important close to your month of fasting. And I just think that Eid is around the corner. So I'm looking forward to those festivities. Can I just begin by asking you a question, if I may, which is, what's bringing you joy? I'm going to just put this in chat. So what's bringing you joy today? What's bringing you joy today? Just very quickly. What's bringing you joy? Type faster, I did. Okay. Good weather, 4-year-old, cherry blossoms. Yes. Good weather, this keynote, Josh, my cat, spring flowers, sunshine, pumpkin plants, very nice. The walk outside, beautiful, time with my daughter, all that sort of stuff. Yay. Sorry, Cora, was there a birthday involved? Did I just hear that? Cora, was there a birthday involved today? Is this your birthday today? Cora McCloy, are we from CTSI?
Yes.
Well, colleagues, what do you say when somebody has a birthday?
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Cora.
Happy birthday to you. And many more.
Yay!
Ten seconds. I just had to have a little bit of that in my life. Stevie Wonder. Can I just join everyone in wishing Cora a happy birthday? She is a tremendous resource at CTSI. And the reason I did this exercise is really simple, and that's this. All of us are going through a lot of, as President Gertler mentioned, displacement of our norms, our routines, the ways that we have used to being. I think it's important for us to start every day as teachers, as faculty members, by really focusing on what is bringing us joy. And the reason that I say that is unless we can do that, I feel that we're not able to transmigrate that in the context of our work, right? So we are responsible for creating opportunities. One of the things that I love about being a professor at the University of Toronto is that I get to contribute to the very institution where I went to school a few times over. And that's just awesome to me. But I think recognizing the challenges of where we are is important. I want to tell you a bit about myself and why I think this is the right time to have this conversation. Here is a crowd favorite. I think you will like this. 30 seconds of your time.
Hello, Nouman. Hello, Nouman. Hello, Nouman.
It's not Nouman.
Hello, Nouman. Hello, Nouman. Nouman!
It's Nouman. It's not Nouman.
Nouman!
It's Nouman. Not Nouman. It's Nouman. Nouman. Hashtag hustle.
All right, so don't call me Nouman or Norman or late for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. I'm Nouman, and I think that the conversation that we're about to have requires this question to be answered. Why are we really here? Why are we really here at the symposium? But also, why are we really here at the University of Toronto? Professor Susan McCann, when I first met her a few years ago, asked me to pick up a book. It's called Academic Duty, written by this guy, Don Kennedy, who's a former president at Stanford University. I quite liked the book. And one of the things that really stood out for me was his assertion about the value proposition or the meaningfulness of what a university can do. He said, the university is above all else about opportunity. The opportunity to give others the personal and intellectual platform they need to advance the culture, to preserve life, and to guarantee a sustainable human future. I think that's true. But I think there's something else there that I wanted to highlight, given where we are at the University of Toronto. One of the things that I think that we do so well vis-a-vis our peers is that we are a great university in a great city. One of the three priorities for our President Gertler, is precisely that. And if you're looking for a session to come to on Friday, we're doing a session on learning from community. I'll talk a bit about the work that I have the privilege of doing with the School of Cities, along with Professor Manny Samitecki and Nation Chung from United Way, Greater Toronto. To me, I think there's something about the fact that we're a public university in one of the most diverse cities in the globe. So why does that matter? I think that if we don't leverage the unique opportunity that we have of being located in an amazing metropolis, I think we lose out on some of the magic that U of T brings. What is the magic like? To me, that magic begins by understanding that our three campuses are home to an incredible array of diverse communities who choose to come here and who see us as a vehicle for all kinds of discovery, all kinds of mobilization. Remember, knowledge creation, knowledge mobilization? I think that's why we're here at the University of Toronto. I also want to say to you that I think that not only are we up for the challenges of our time, we're best equipped to handle them, but that requires for us to do something. Again, I'm going to ask you, for those that are able to stand up. So stand up, jazz hands, jazz hands, jazz hands. Let's put our hands together like this, right? You see my hand right there? Yeah. Now, Alexander, I want you to notice which thumb is over which one. See, I have my left thumb over my right thumb. Cool? And you may have the other. Now, jazz hands, jazz hands, jazz hands. Let's come back together again. And this time I'm going to ask you to put your non-dominant thumb over your dominant thumb. So now I have placed my right thumb over my left thumb. How does that feel? Alexander, I'm going to ask you, how does that feel?
Awkward.
Awkward. Awkward.
A little bit. Yeah, it feels different. Not awkward, maybe different. Different is
Feels different. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
We are going to ask Jennifer Harris, how did that feel?
Yeah, a little awkward, but intriguing.
Okay, intriguing. Cool. Couple others. You guys put it in your chat how that felt to you. Someone awkward, wrong, new, odd, strange, felt weird. Yeah, uncomfortable. That's exactly right. Surprisingly different. Okay, that's the point I want to make. I actually think that one of the things that this pandemic has taught us is that we actually have to create the capacity within ourselves to try some new things. And that is the starting point for this conversation. I believe that fundamentally we're here to create adaptive experts. What does that mean? Adaptive expert. So I want to stop share for a second, and I'm gonna go to my friendly Mentimeter account, and I'm gonna invite you to answer this question by asking you to please put in this link into your browser. Hope you're not doing other stuff here. And I'm going to present this. And I'm going to put in the chat the link to Mentimeter. There we go. We've seen this a few times. If you just go in, and I've got a question for you, right? And the question is this. Here's my question. I'm asking everyone, when you think about adaptive expertise, what comes to mind? Let's see if we can see some answers. Flexibility, skill building, flexibility, future ready, nice, flexibility, responsiveness. Nothing, all right, lifelong learning, jargon, resilience, change is a constant, agility. Cool. Any others? Knowing what you know and knowing what you, let's see here. Flexibility, knowledge translation. Okay, so we have some idea of what people are changing. So inclusivity, fluidity, agility, the chat, open to change. So let me ask you a question right this second. So we just did an exercise, which is I asked you a question and I used a different platform, which is Mentimeter. Now I can assume that somehow Mentimeter works best for me because we can actually see that in a visual form. I think adaptive expertise is asking this question. How can I think about doing the exact same thing with different processes? So let me ask you another question, and this time I'm going to use chat. Which do you prefer? Mentimeter or Zoom chat? Chat, Mentimeter, Menti, chat, Zoom, chat, okay. Clearly it's split down the middle. Sure. Yeah. Francisco, do you want to just mute yourself and talk to us about the question you posed? Please and thank you.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Although I was trying to prepare my breakfast. How disrespectful.
Not at all. But what's for breakfast? First, tell us that.
Well, just eggs in the microwave. Don't put me in the spot. But loving you. Okay, very quickly. The question is, because it happens to me. I happen to have a bit of an effervescent, personality, and I'm a male, and I pass as white, and all those kinds of things. So the first reaction always is people who are either frustrated or discouraged or they're haters is like, well, you can do this because of those reasons. And so I'm always at a loss of words what to say how to respond to that. I mean, because some of those things are true. I have access, I have a PhD, I have this, I have that, but I still believe in democratic education. Thanks for taking the question.
Of course. So I actually want to build on that because that is super, super, super important, right? It's this. I want to say to you that one of the great things, one of the many things we've learned from the pandemic is this thing that I call privilege inequity. We recognize that privilege inequity is real. Like I can give you my own personal example, right? I want to be honest and vulnerable with you. I want to say to you that I am actually presenting from a space that's neither my office at the Rotman School, which is over there at 105 St. George, nor my home, which is in Don Mills. I have the privilege of renting out the studio because I want to have a separate dedicated space where I can do my work. That's an enormous amount of privilege. I have broadband internet access. I have time away from my family, and so on and so forth. Many of my peers don't have that. My learners, certainly, a lot of them don't have that. People that I work with, right, don't have that. I have really good rates, Kosha, for the weekend when you can use the space. We'll talk offline about that. But to me, privilege and equity, understanding that is super important. So I want to say to you, though, the most important thing, right, isn't the amount of privilege we have. It's actually, what are we doing with these privileges? I think that there's a lot of privileges that we have that we don't even account for. The great U of T graduate, professor here at St. Mike's, Marshall McLuhan, once said the following. He said, we don't know who discovered water, but we're pretty certain it wasn't the fish. Right? We don't know how close we are to the things that surround us. And fish don't know they're wet, likewise. I want to say to you that precisely where we have privileges is also where we have blind spots. And I think it's important, right? I think it's super important for us to acknowledge that. I think it's important to then say, how am I using my privileges in service of impact? So when I say adaptive expert, to me, and this is my personal understanding of this phenomenon, to me, an adaptive expert is someone who actually asks the question, how do I embrace this tension, which is essential to pedagogy? So what's this tension? The tension that we have in pedagogy is oftentimes we see ourselves as knowledge holders, right? Because that's been our training. And we see ourselves knowledge holders and we do transmission. And President Gertler actually spoke about this, right? This symposium isn't just simply about transmission mode. I believe that adaptive expertise is about shifting modalities from transmission mode to unearthing mode. What does that mean? Unearthing mode. You see, I want to suggest that learners have a ton of experience, of aspiration, of ambition, and insight that they bring to the learning exchange. It is our responsibility as teachers to actually create the conditions where we can unearth some of these things. And we do that in a way not simply about getting them to think about the right answer, but to co-develop ways in which we understand one truth, which is that the map is not the terrain. I'm going to share with you an assignment that I gave to my undergraduate Rotman Commerce students. So these are students in the 3rd and 4th year of our undergraduate program here at the Rotman School of Management, joint program with the Faculty of Arts and Science. And I said to them on the first day of class, right? Imagine that you're hungry youth, because the course was actually about thinking in a social innovation lens, and you have 1 hour to find food in the city. What might you do? So first 10 minutes, we actually did a brainstorm. And then I got up and I put my hands in my pocket and I gave each of them a token, a subway token, 2 in fact. 1 to get on the subway, to locate the food, and then, if they needed to, and then to come back to where we were in exactly 1 hour. The session was meant to be 3 hours long. Students hung around for an additional 2 hours after the session was done. Why? Why do you think? Let's go in the chat. What do you think happened in that exchange? Waiting. Panic, okay. Authentic situational learning, cool. I engaged them in learning, nice. They had fun, they had stories to tell. Discovery. Yeah, it was deeply experiential. The students were actually able to do this, right? They were actually able to walk a mile in the journey of those for whom they thought they were looking to solve the problem. And I think that we have the exact same challenges teachers. We think about course design, we think about pedagogy, we think about curriculum by saying, how do we design for our learners? And then I want to change that. I want to suggest that the flip around teacher as learner, learner as teacher is to say, not simply how do we design for, but how do we design with? I also want to suggest to you, and I'm being very honest when I say this, what comes next, it is easy for us as teachers to coast and do the same thing and simply to pivot to new platforms. But I think that is a necessary but insufficient condition for impact. Because I think we need to design with our learners. I want to be even more vulnerable with you. Exactly a year ago, right, I started to teach my MBA elective called Leading Social Innovation. And it was the first time I was teaching that course entirely online. It is a business design elective. It is an experiential course. It involves community partnerships. And I worked really hard to make sure that I was able to pivot, right? This whole initiative using this technology. When I got the feedback from that session, from that course, it was pretty flat. And I want to share with you just one thing that I completely missed out on. So I had myself and my teaching team in one of the classrooms at the Rotman School, and we were actually presenting like this, right, through our setup. What students said in the course evaluations, wait for this. They said, your being in the classroom with the teaching team and us not being in the classroom with you heightened what the cool kids call FOMO, the fear of missing out. We really felt that we were missing out on not being there at the Rotman School with you. That blew my mind. Why? Because I was still in my own comfort zone and not recognizing that I was not that relatable. Because as I think it is, let me see here in the chat. A wonderful question is posed. They recognize the privilege that I had, right, in this. So Maria, Ashraf, can I ask you to unmute, please, and just share your question? Thank you.
Hi, Nouman. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation, and I'm looking forward for the rest. It was not actually a question, it's more of a comment that many times as I'm hopefully and humbly making an impact on students in the classroom, I always wonder how many students I'm missing.
Yeah.
Because I know that academia is an elitist platform. And I know that there are many people who cannot access universities, whether at a younger age or an older age.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I want to say to you, Maria, the following. I want to say to you that to me, one of the great privileges that we have is to use our multiple privileges in service of that impact. And just my opinion now, coming up, so wait for it. 3 things have to be connected, right? Access, equity, and excellence. Access. We've got to make sure that when we make this promissory note, sorry, as the cool kids call it, the e-transfer, to our learners, that we're doing this in an accessible way, that anyone who wants access to that through our registration systems, through our classroom experiences, can cash that e-transfer. I.e., we give them the password to do that. Explain what that relationship is between us and the learner. 2, equity. Equity means resetting our design understanding to recognize that many of what has been the norm in the classroom was decided a long time ago with different users, learners, and teachers in mind, and to challenge that. And 3, to absolutely insist on excellence starting with ourselves. You see, to me, excellence and perfection are not the same. Perfection is a mirage. But excellence begins by asking this question. And Maria, I loved your frame of humbly teaching, right? Excellence to me begins with this frame. How does the world, what does the world lose out if I don't show up as my personal self? And I want to say to you that in this dialogue, which is my way of engaging in conversation in this keynote, I want to share with you a big, massive failure of my own. Again, in my undergraduate class, I teach a course called Leading Across Differences. And there, I have my music going and I am ready with my slide deck and my 3 boards ready and so on and so forth. This is the 4th time I was teaching the course. Wordsworth in the dugout there, 10 a.m., started class at 10 after 10. At 10:05, I see a student walking in with a walking cane. She's legally blind. And I have to tell you, I'm completely stunned. I don't know what to do. All of my slides are super visual. All of my antics are in person. And now I'm worried. So let me ask you, let me stop share for a second and ask you, what might you do if you were in my shoes, right? And let me tell you, there were sweaty shoes at this moment in time because I was sweating buckets. Okay, Ben, talk to us, please.
I would just ask her.
Okay.
Just like in most cases when you're working with people with exceptionalities or with learning or physical accessibility needs, check in with them. They know best how they learn and what they need.
Cool. So that's good. Elham, talk to us, please. So talk to her about her learning needs.
Absolutely. I would just reiterate the same thing, that she knows best what her needs are, and including her in that conversation before you get sweaty, before you really have to think about, what is my learner asking for here and how can I best provide that to her?
Cool. So I want to get super tactical with you folks now. How do I approach them? How do I approach them in a way that I don't kind of shock them? I don't, in that moment, kind of, make them feel like they're the center of attention? How do you do that in a way that we separate ourselves from sympathy versus empathy? What do you think? Okay, Erin, talk to us, please. Erin Stiles.
Oh, yes. Hi. So I would probably not bring it up right in that moment in front of a class. I don't know how big the class is, but even if it's really small, it would probably make her feel really weird if you were like, hey, I noticed that you're differently able. Talk to me about that. What do you need right now? So probably wouldn't do that. I think to get through that session, to get through the sweaty shoes moment, I would be describing the visual elements to the best of my abilities. So if you have really visual slides like the slide you just showed, I'm showing a slide that has a picture of a subway car on it, and the text on the slide reads, I don't remember what it said, you have 1 hour to get food, something like that. And just describe the antics. So I'm standing at the front of the class, I'm waving my hands, we're clapping, we're dancing, we're doing jazz hands to get through that session so she doesn't feel left out and she doesn't feel left behind. And then at the end of class, just, catch her before she leaves and mention, Rebecca saying, hi, I'm Dr. Ashraf. And in this moment, I'm realizing that I've not designed this class with universal design principles. That might be a great way to privately capture her at the end. Just say, hey, I noticed that you're using a visual aid. What would be the best way to get through this class for you? And then you can also, and I think there's disability services that you can work with as an instructor on campus to think about how you can do that without having to ask your students.
Thank you. Kate, you want to build on that? Also, you said also assume something else. Please jump in.
Hi, everyone. I just was bringing to light the point that that's like and maybe there's a visual cue there that is a student who has a particular learning need, but there are probably other students in the room who may also benefit from some of the approaches that would work for the student as well. So bringing that to be a conversation for the whole class to have as well.
Thank you. Andrew, you got a hand up. Please jump in. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, that I think it's more important to foster a community within the classroom, that all students feel comfortable coming forward and letting us know what they need and what accommodations can be present for them to feel comfortable in their learning. Just because you've noted one student with something visual doesn't mean there aren't quite a few other students who need some support.
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to say to you, the same principles that apply to our learners around deep learning versus strategic learning apply to us. So to me, being a strategic learner on pedagogy, all what I might do is just do my thing with slight modification. But I actually think, and many of you actually put this in the chat, that deep learning, even for ourselves as pedagogues, as professors, as teachers, is only fully realized when it's supported by active and regular reflection. By asking this question, what am I learning from each session? My teaching team members will tell you, just like my good colleague, Professor Alison Gibbs outed me, I insist on feedback from every session. I don't want to wait till the midterm. I don't want to wait till the end of term, right? In every session, I ask 3 questions. Number 1, what might you tweet about today? What's your one takeaway? Number 2, what were your positives? And not just from the learning itself, but the whole experience. And number 3, what might you change? So what I did was, before I started the class, I went to speak to the student who I will call Anjali, not her real name. I went to Anjali and said, Anjali, my name is Nouman. I'm the professor. I'm delighted that you're in the course. Tell me how I can make this course the same meaningful, transformative experience that I aspire to for everybody else. And we don't have to talk about it right now, but I just want to say to you that in the next break, if I can give you that time to think about it, I'll come out. And if that's the right time for us to have a conversation, I'd love to. And next, I want to ask you, what's your coffee order? Because every student gets a coffee who really asks a really compelling question or answers in a compelling way. I feel like you've asked me a compelling question. So when I ask you what your coffee order is, went upstairs to L'Espresso, got our coffee order, and came back. Now, to me, that reflection piece is something that we often think about when it comes to PTR, progress through the ranks, activity reports. Gosh, have I done mine? I think I have it. Yes, I'm done. I'm done for the term. Good, right? But I think that regular reflection really, really, really matters, right? Metaphors matter. Language matters. I also want to say to you that thinking about our own social location is super important. Audre Lorde once said, the quality of light by which we scrutinize our lives has direct bearing upon the product which we live and upon the changes which we hope to bring about through those lives. That's a lot of words, but I love, 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 love that frame. It's about interrogation. It's about asking the question, how have I come to be where I am? So I want to do that with you. So here's how it started. That's me at age 5. You can see why I was the favorite of my parents and grandparents. Just kidding, just kidding. That's how it started, and this is how it's going. But I think it's important for me to ask this question. When I was a younger person, right? What inspired me? What made me feel, fully engaged in my experiences? But I also want to ask another question. So let me stop here and ask you this. Colleagues, tell me, when was the first time that you became aware of difference? When was the first time that you became aware of difference? Difference. Grade 1. Tyson, talk to us. What happened in grade 1?
There were kids who looked different than me, and I wondered why. And then I also liked different kinds of kids than other boys liked, and so I wondered why.
Cool. Tamara, how about you? Please, thank you.
Oh, very, very similar. Just children looking different. Kindergarten, before kindergarten, you're just with your family. So yeah, lots of differences noticed.
Thank you. Jennifer Ismail?
Yeah, I think probably my earliest memory would be one of difference because, as I said in the chat, my parents are deaf. And so any space that we would go into, they would be, they were different. They were disabled, and people would, people would stare, or they would need interpretation, that kind of thing.
Thank you. Francisco?
Hello. 5, when I realized that I had the hots for a classmate who was my same gender. But at 4, when I was taught, I was always brought to talk to my mom's company's friends because for some reason they wanted to interact with me, and I grew up among strangers and adults.
Thank you. For me, it was at about age 4. I was playing in the lap of my paternal grandmother, my daddy, and I noticed something. The way that the son was playing with her eyes, I realized for the very first time that she had gray eyes. And I had never noticed that. Never noticed that. And then I found myself for the rest of the day staring at everyone's eyes because the rest of my family had brown eyes. And that really got me started on this journey of saying, how do we actually think about difference? What does it actually look like? What does it actually feel like? So why am I raising that with you? I'm raising that with you because locating ourselves in this conversation about how we have come to be where we are is important for us to empathize with our learners. But I also think there's something else that comes with that. So this slide here of me leading the academic procession at the Rotman School a few years ago, a lot of time people think that that's what purpose looks like. No. See, for me, purpose is a response to this question by Professor Gary Hamel at the London Business School, who asks, what purpose is worth the currency of my life? If we think about our life as currency, right? Every second, every minute, every hour, every day, every week, every month, every term, every year, what is the return on time invested? What I call the ROTI factor, not the wonderful stuff I get in West Indian stores, but return on time invested. And I think it's important for us to think about that in the context of teaching and learning. The key thing for me around purpose is that our purpose must trump the process that we engage in. Why is that? So let me ask, agree, disagree, don't care. I believe that our purpose as teachers needs to trump the process. Agree, disagree, don't care. Let's see what's happening in the chat. Emmanuel, talk to us, please. Agree, how come?
Well, the process is something that at some point we've defined or somebody has defined. Okay. The purpose is more than that. So yeah, and thank you for all the ideas you're giving us today. I'm taking huge amounts of notes. Thank you.
Thank you for yours, right? I could stand in front of the Zoom screen and talk to myself, it wouldn't be the same. Okay, so some people are saying, well, it's a false dichotomy. It's true. I don't think it's either or, I think it's both. But I think, well, let me pause about what I think. Manjeet, talk to us, please.
Sorry, just saying that, I think of purpose being meaning to what I'm doing every day at work and for students versus which creates that meaning, then gives me that ability to feel like I'm being buffered from any potential from compassion fatigue, burnout, all of those sorts of things.
For sure. Thank you. Andrew Graham, I love your very pithy but powerful statement there. Purpose can underpin process. Talk to us, please. Andrew Graham going in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Lydia, talk to us, please. Wilkinson.
Well, I'm really interested in sort of empowering my students to become lifelong learners. So I think that when the process of teaching for me models how you become an effective learner.
Got it. Okay, cool. But I feel that in what you're saying, the purpose still is for them to become those learners. And that's how you use the process in service of that. Okay, cool.
You got me.
Cool. Andrea, Graham, we feel your pain, not being able to unmute yourself. All right. I want to go back to my screen because I want to give you a break in a few minutes because our brain is turning into mush or mashed potatoes, depending on how you see it. Heather Kelly, Do we have shared definitions of purpose and process? Let's go there. What's yours?
Question, Nouman. I think I'm still unpacking both those terms myself.
Yes.
But I think with respect to purpose, for example, in higher ed, we're aware of the differing understandings of the purpose of higher education, whether that be the more instrumental view of acquiring a credential and or more of the view I think many of us share as educators about supporting and creating active, engaged and knowledgeable citizens. And I think, again, these are not either or, and these definitions of purpose can hopefully sit side by side, but I do think exploring what we mean by purpose and process is helpful to unearth some of those different ways of thinking about our work. So I'll just offer that as a thought.
Yeah, I love it. I also want to say that this definition is my take. I welcome you to bring yours into this conversation. And the reason for that is if it's not personalized, this doesn't mean anything. So I'm going to share with you my purpose at the University of Toronto. I hope there's a safe space for me to say this. My purpose is for every individual that I interact with, I want them to have a unique and transformative learning experience. That's one half. And the other half is for me to be a faculty member, to recognize my privileges and not to be a jerk. And the two are very inextricably intertwined for me. I really mean that, right? For me, it's about making sure that I show up in ways that people are having those transformative learning experiences and they're experiencing me as somebody who's accessible and meaningfully engaging. I also do consulting to organizations around organizational design, inclusion, teaming, and so on and so forth. And oftentimes I'll get calls out of the blue from organizations, many of them healthcare, post-secondary institutions. Then, Nouman, we want you to come and talk to us about innovation. So I said to them, tell me, what is your innovation strategy at the moment? And they'll say to me, oh, we have a working group on this. Now, colleagues, tell me, when they quickly go to a working group, is that purpose or is that process? Well, to me, that's process. And I want to say to you that innovation intent really, truly matters to how successful we are at making innovation land. All of this to say, my advice to you is make no little plans. And I'm actually paraphrasing Daniel Burnham, who is a city planner. It says, make no little plans because they have no ability to inspire fire in the hearts. He said, men, I mean people. I understand people. And I think that it's important. Avi, great question. Recognize my privilege and not be a jerk. What do you think? Is that purpose, process, or both? What do you think?
I think it's both.
I think it is both. I think that, to me, the first part is to lead or enable a transformative learning experience for every person that I encounter. And the process of doing that involves me not being a jerk. All right, people, you know what this means? This means that it is now 10 o'clock. We've been on Zoom for an hour, and our capacity to engage is really, really being challenged. And I want to say that it is time for us to have a 5-minute break. Is that cool with everyone? 5-minute break, is that good? Nobody wants a break. Oh my gosh. All right, let's come back in 5 minutes. You can turn your camera on, off, whatever you got to do. Let's do this, please and thank you.
I got a feeling that tonight's gonna be a good night. That tonight's gonna be a good night. That that tonight's gonna be a good, good night. Feel it. That tonight's gonna be a good night. That tonight's gonna be a good night. That tonight's gonna be a good, good night. Feel it. That tonight's gonna be a good night. That tonight's gonna be a good night. That tonight's gonna be a good, good night. Feel it. That tonight's gonna be a good night. That tonight's gonna be a good night. That tonight's gonna be a good, good night. Tonight's the night. Let's live it up. I got my money. Let's spend it up. Go out and smash it. Like, oh my God. Jump out that sofa. Let's kick it on. I know you will have a ball. Get down and go out and just look it all. I'm still stressed out. I wanna let it go. Let's go way out, spaced out, and losing all control. Fill up my cup. Mazel tov. Look at her dancing. Just take it off. Let's paint the town. We'll shut it down. Let's burn the roof. And then we'll do it again. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. And do it. And do it. Let's do it. And do it. And do it. And do it. Do it. Do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. 'Cause I got a feeling that tonight's gonna be a good night. That tonight's gonna be a good night. That tonight's gonna be a good, good night. Feeling that tonight's gonna be a good night. That tonight's gonna be a good night. That tonight's gonna be a good, good night. Tonight's the night. Hey, let's live it up. I got my money. Hey, let's spin it up. Let's spin it up. Go out and smash it. Like, oh my God. Like, oh my God. Jump out that sofa. Come on. Let's kick it off. Fill up my cup. Mazel tov. Look at her dancing. Let's take it off. Let's paint the town. We'll shut it down. Let's burn the roof. And then we'll do it again. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. And do it. And do it. Let's live it up. And do it. And do it. And do it. Do it. Do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. Do it. Do it. Do it. Here we come. Here we go. We gotta rock. Easy come. Easy go. Now we on top. Feel the shot. Body rock. Rock it. Don't stop. Round and round. Up and down. Around the clock. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. والله شكلي حبيتك يا قلبي لك بغيابك انا تعبان والله شكلي حبيتك يا قلبي لك يخرب بيتك انا شفتك صدفة ولقيتك صرتي بدمي ادمان شكلك من عالم تاني انا والله ضايع عنواني حبيتك انا بثواني بغيابك انا تعبان بغيابك انا تعبان والله بانت الحكاية نوتيلا انت ونوقايا حبيتك بس ضل معايا في بعدك انا دبلان شايف بعيونك قصة انا طالب منك هالفرصة دقات لقلبي عم حسها لك يمكن انا عشقان
Last track, last track. All right, welcome back. It's always nice to have a dance party in the middle of class. That's kind of my standing routine. So I love the swagger of the dancers in the house. I love it. Thank you for very quickly. I'm going to ask you. We spent an hour together. I want to go to the chat very quick and say, what's one thing that's landed for you? One thing that has landed for you. Boom, boom. Let's go. Do that with. Thank you. Okay. You love a job. Deep strategic learning. Good. Energy of the session. All right. Be bolder. Be an adaptive educator. Thank you. The framing of transmission mode, unearthing mode. Process. Cool. Students come to class. Nice. Nice. Very cool. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I want us to go from the theoretical to what I think of as super practical real quick. And which is to say, I said to you, my advice to you is make no little plans. And then the question, of course, is, well, where do we begin? And I think that we need to begin by embracing this one truth, that discomfort and learning are linked. They're linked for our learners. They're also linked for us as teachers, right? So if we're not getting out of our comfort zones, there's just not a chance that we're actually innovating in a meaningful way. So I wanted to get us out of healthcare in a second, and education in a second to healthcare, right? And for me, that's super important because this is one of my favorite examples. Anyone's taken a course with me knows that I use the example relentlessly. How many of us have actually had an MRI scan? Very quick, put your hands up. Yeah, we can give it, one of the reaction things. Okay, cool, many of us. And now, please put in the chat very quickly, in one word, the experience that you had of the MRI scan. Scared, extensive, loud, cool, comfortable, loud, panicking, small, meditative, claustrophobic, clicky. All right, so I'm gonna tell you a story. So one fine evening, I was feeling very creative, and I decided to make the entire dinner for my family. And then about 40 minutes later, what happened is that I felt sharp pain in my lower left abdominal region. And I, trained researcher, went and talked to all of my subjects, my family members, and said, how was the lasagna? How was the salad? How was the chicken? How was the dessert? Any tummy issues? No one has tummy issues, okay? So now I know for a fact that I am patient zero. Next, I do what I do best, which is lie down on the couch and expect for things to solve themselves. Doesn't happen. My pain gets worse and worse and worse. Thirdly, I go up and down the stairs a few times. Even that doesn't work. I text a buddy of mine who's a doc, and he calls me back and he asks me a bunch of questions. And he said, I know what your problem is. I'm like, be precise, I've got many. He said, no, the one you texted me about. He says, you, my friend, have kidney stones. I'm like, okay, I can handle that. He goes, no, you can't. Get to Sunnybrook as quickly as you can. I'm like, dude, I'm tough. I got teenagers, I can handle this. He goes, no, you can't. And he's right. So when I get to Sunnybrook, right, this is what I see. And for me, what I notice is this very small, narrow hole through which I have to go. And that freaked me out because, as you may not be able to tell, I'm a well-raised, well-fed, all local, fully organic kind of guy. And I'm like, I'm gonna get stuck in the darn machine. I'm having this fear. And then here's the announcement: lie very still, please don't move, and breathe as little as possible. I'm like, gosh, they are trying to kill me. And then I have these throwbacks to Bugs Bunny and the cartoon, the guillotine, the bologna slicer, that, right? And then, I don't know about you, but I have never been able to figure out this hospital gown business. I always have a draft going up my back, and I've even tried double bagging and stuff. It didn't work. Well, the machine I'm showing you a version of this was designed by a guy named Doug Dietz. And Doug Dietz works in GE Healthcare, and him and his team were really proud of this machine. They're proud of this machine precisely because this machine addressed one of the key issues that many of you raised, which is noise. These things are noisy. And it was lower cost. So it was a win-win for both of them, right? They were all kind of super excited about this. He was so excited about this, him and his team showed up for the very first rollout at a children's hospital. And Doug Dietz tells the story, and when he saw that, it broke his heart. Because the very first child that he saw who came to this machine clung onto her dad's arms. Daddy, I can't do this. I'm too scared. And he overheard the father say, honey, you gotta try. We spoke about this. She said, nuh-uh, I can't do this. And then he notices the radiologist pick up a phone, and in comes an anesthetist who delivers general anesthesia. And this child is out cold. And Doug Dietz is like freaking out. So he asks a radiologist, how often does it happen? And they say, you mean of the times they actually show up for their appointments? He said, what do you mean? He said, only about half of them show up for their appointments. And of the ones that show up, upwards of 80% have to be sedated. And that's if we can find an anesthetist on call that particular day. And said, if you can't, they go back in line 6 to 8 weeks. Time out, time out. Why do we need an MRI scan? Let's go to chat. What were you looking to do besides meditate? What were you looking for? Good. Diagnosis. Okay, what diagnosis an MRI scan give you that X-rays and other things can't? Yeah, soft tissue stuff. What's the worst thing you can find in soft tissue? Starts with a C, ends with an R, has an N in the center? Yeah, cancer. What do we know about cancer and young people? Well, when you're younger, all of our cells are multiplying. The healthy ones and the cancerous ones. What can happen to a young person who has a cancerous growth that is growing over 6 to 8 weeks that goes undiagnosed? A lot of bad stuff. That's exactly what Doug Dietz thought as well. From a technical perspective, was this machine innovative? Sure. From an impact definition, was this machine innovative? Well, Doug Dietz didn't think so, and neither did his team. They left Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is where they do their work. They all went to the D School, which is at Stanford, and they spent a lot of time on their hands and knees with their clipboards, right? Doing a lot of this. Well, why on the hands and knees? Because they were designing no longer for, but with. They were talking to children living with cancer and their caregivers and their parents and their family members. And then they came back, and a few months later, this is what they developed. And now, in one word, how would you describe this? Please go in the chat and put in the one word that captures this for you. Go for it, please, and thank you. Fun, welcoming, an adventure, fun, creative. Yes. Now, the funny thing is, between this and this, the difference is cheap plastic decals. But one more thing. 6 weeks before their appointment, they get chapter one of a story, which is set on a beautiful island. So, you know, big palm tree, the sun's always shining, sort of like Palo Alto, I think, which is the anchor where Stanford is. Week 2, a devastating hurricane wipes out the island. Week 3, the islanders take stock of what's happened. Week 4, they write an SOS in a bottle and throw it into the ocean. Week 5, the neighboring island receives the SOS and it sets sail a supply ship in the direction of the affected island. Week 6, a week before their appointment, pirates, that's right, pirates take over the supply ship, and that is when they get their mission brief. Next week, you got to show up for your appointment, but you got to be very still because the pirates can't know that you're there. Now, let me ask you, back to the chat. Do you think they actually show up for their appointments? What do you think? Heck, they show up in costume. And it's not just them. It's not just them. This is the staff, right? This is the staff. And they get into it. We need to move from a simple, basic definition of innovation as something that we want to put out there into designing experiences with those who most need this and are looking for this. How do you do that? By asking these beautiful questions. This is what Doug Dietz said. They ask questions like, what are 3 chairs and a blanket? How would you answer that, by the way? A fort. Thank you, Jason. A fort, a fort, a fort. A lot of fort lovers here. No ships, no spaceships, a tent. I was thinking hammock, by the way, right? A teepee, an igloo, a hut, right? whatever. Well, let me show you. Let me show you the power of these questions. Let's stop share for a second. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to have a real quick video that I'm going to show you of Doug Dietz. Ready? Let's do share again. And this is Doug Dietz, and this is what he says.
I was very proud of kind of the newer design that was just out, the new MR scanner that I've been working on forever. And I was so consumed with just that scanner itself and kind of, I call it the shiny object, that I totally missed the whole picture when I had this young family come through and they couldn't get through the scanner. And it was just, I mean, it was, of course, for the child who's there in tears, it's very, very tough. But for the parents, and they give each other that look, they don't know how to get their child through this experience. It was just really, really hard for me. When I came back, I said, you know what? I'm going to change this.
So I'm going to pause here for a second. There's something when he hits this failure thing, he didn't say, oh my gosh, what is their problem? He says, I am responsible for creating something more than just innovation that hits the technical jargon definitions. I'm responsible for creating experiences for the ones that I am failing, that our collective work is failing.
Just putting some imagery on the walls and on the machine to make this more of an adventure was the key to it. But that's just kind of like the icing on the cake. The cake is really the experience the child's in. But you know, a lot of times when I describe adventure series, it's kind of like, you know, what are 3 chairs and a blanket? You know, everybody says it's, you know, it's a castle, it's a truck, it can be anything. And the children will play with that, 3 chairs and a blanket forever. They can put themselves in this magical place. Well, why not do that when you have to go to the hospital? My name is Doug Dietz, and my pay for it idea is humanizing diagnostic imaging for everybody.
So that's Doug Dietz, and that's how he thinks about his important role as an engineer. To me, that's a beautiful example of purpose and process coming together. So what's the aha for me? And I've met Doug Dietz, he can never tell the story without crying. My most beautiful memory of speaking to him was he said, when they actually put this together, and he was talking to the parents about the experience, because parents were grateful, and the 7-year-old was tugging at one of her parents' garment, and they said, Mommy, can we come back tomorrow? And that's when Doug Dietz loses it. He cries. So he said that's what he was doing then. He was crying. And then he felt bad because he was being vulnerable. And then he noticed a nurse was crying. And he describes how the mascara was like coming down her face. And he went up to her and apologized and said, I'm so sorry that I made this a mess for me and for you. And she looked at him and said, are you serious? This is why I'm in healthcare. To me, connecting purpose and process is also about activating the most important leadership skill that I think exists out there today. It's empathy. And I want to get definitional with you. It's the ability to experience and understand what others feel, while maintaining a clear discernment about your own and the other person's feelings and perspectives. You see, I love the message hierarchy in this. It begins with our ability to experience and then to understand what others are feeling. You're going to say, why is the professor at the Rockland School of Management talking about feelings this early on a Wednesday morning? Because as Dan Goldman says, who's the author of Emotional Intelligence, it's not only that feelings matter. Feelings are what mattering is all about. If we can't see ourselves as being designers in that space, I think we're kind of missing the plot. So I have a question for us. What gets in our way? What gets in our way? Why is it that we don't embrace that feeling side as teachers, the curiosity side, that empathy side. We'll get to know where. Focus on content delivery. Sure. Thank you, Cora. Others? Energy, capacity, logistics, habituation. Thank you. Sometimes numbers. Sometimes imposter syndrome. Thank you, Jennifer Harris. Time. Maybe afraid of managing emotions. Honest. I love that. You see, all these things are true patterns. Thank you, Carol, that are hard to break. Narratives of being professional. Fear of being vulnerable. I also think that there's a fundamental misunderstanding about this thing called empathy. You see, I don't believe that we can empathize with an idea. We can only empathize with experience. And the most commonly used expression for empathy is to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. But you know what we have to do as teachers and learners? We've got to take our shoes off first. We've got to take our shoes off of expert and to take on and to put on the experience of being beginners. To really relish that experience. I want to say to you without any hesitation and without any embarrassment that the thing that gets me emotional every time that I walk onto campus is going back to the same places where I came as a transfer student from the States as an undergraduate and feeling how I can make the experience different or better for somebody else. I want to leave time for Q&A, but before I do that, I want to give you a tangible example of how we can actually take the beginner mindset and embrace that in our daily work as teachers. This is Ken Bain. I love his book. What the Best College Teachers Do is also out of version, which says what the best college students do. I had the privilege of attending his conference 3-day institute a decade ago. In his book, he says disciplines can benefit both from vigorous epistemological inquiries into what it means to know in the field and from research on how people learn to think. I love that. Epistemology is quite simply, right? How do we know what we know? But we also need to look at research as to how people learn how to think. Mental models matter, including our own. I think that one of the ways that we can get out of the expert mindset, beginner mindset, is in fact to explore who are the partners that we have available to us within our existing opportunity sets to become better learners. And some of those are right under our noses, like our students. For me, this has been really helpful. This is part of my teaching team. And I'm going to share this with you back in the day when we could go to Espresso and to debrief at the end of term about what worked, what didn't work, how do we actually change things. To me, my teaching team, which is comprised of current and former students, is the kind of secret sauce to how I stay in that zone. This is me quoting me. How's that for you go? As educators, we need to create conditions under which students learn from us, each other, and offer meaningful contribution to us as instructors. To me, this is how I keep it fresh. This is how I keep it real. And this is how I twin my ambition for innovation and engagement with regular insight that is evidence-based. So my model is this, that we actually have to have learning that happens learner to learner, teacher to learner, and learner to teacher. Every single instance. I ask myself the question, how do I design for this outcome? How do I create this in every single interaction? And so what does that look like? To me, first and foremost, I have to watch out for this habit that I have. I've been trained to aim for perfection. Get out of that and instead to have a low resolution prototyping mindset. How do I create a better version with each interaction? How do I do that? Well, first and foremost, understanding this one thing, that 100%, wait for the little pun in there, 100% of people who succeed get started. So get started with a low resolution prototype. It begins by asking the question, how am I putting out the invitation to my student partners out there? And this to me is super important. So what I want to do next is I want to share with you some narratives of some student consultants that I've had the privilege of learning from and working with. So here goes. This is Taylor.
Hi there, my name is Taylor Kim, and I am a research associate to Professor Nouman Ashraf. I have worked with Nouman for several years now, and if I had to distill all my learnings into one thing, it would be to put purpose before process. So by that, I've learned that when you're working with students or even external clients and doing work for them, it's always so easy to get caught up in the methodology of things, right? The process, the correct way of doing this versus that, following all the steps. And while all of that process stuff is very important, it's really important to have a conversation about the true purpose of the work. Because once you're focused always on the purpose and the true purpose and you never lose sight of that, then it's way easier to keep things on track and to make sure you get the learning outcomes that you aim for.
As you can tell, Taylor is super awesome. She's graduated from the MBA program. She's now working at Shopify, Canada's largest company by market cap. And she works in, what else? Service design, experience design. I am so proud of all of the learnings that I had from Taylor. I want to next introduce you to Alicia, another MBA student and graduate who is now doing her doctoral work at the London Business School.
Hello, my name is Alicia Riolino, and I am a student consultant with Professor Nouman Ashraf at the Rotman School of Management. Over the last year, I've had the opportunity to work with Nouman as well as several other consultants on a few different projects. My main focus in the last year has been on redeveloping and deploying Nouman's course, Leading Social Innovation, which is a critical part of the leadership and sustainability curriculum at the Rotman School, as well as assisting with 2 significant cultural audits of large Canadian organizations. My work with Leading Social Innovation has mainly focused on understanding how students experience the class and how we are achieving the learning outcomes that we've set out for ourselves as the teaching assistants and for Nouman as the instructor. I've been fortunate to be able to take my learning experience as a student in the class and use that to make tweaks to the way that the course and the students interact with their consulting partners. There's actually a consulting project that's built into Leading Social Innovation. And my experience sort of engaging with our consulting partner gave some insight to how we may be able to improve, and students may be able to get a bit more insight into how consulting projects work and what best practices they should employ. I'm having the opportunity actually currently to work on that class again and take some of the learnings we had from students last year. So now I'm actually taking my experiences as a student and I have applied them to the course in my role as a TA. And now I'm taking my role as a TA and trying to understand again, how might we engage students differently?
So this is the key thing, right? So we have a student who says, this is my experience taking the course. And to me, that's user insight that is just irreplaceable. And then when they work with me in the teaching team, I detest the term teaching assistant. I see them as teaching partners. And then saying, how do I use my lens as a partner in this endeavor in creating capacity for me to connect with others who are peers? And what am I learning? Here's Sarah Koo, who now works at the Boston Consulting Group in Seoul, Korea, undergraduate student and graduate from Rotman Commerce.
Hi, my name is Sarah Koo, and I'm a research associate to Professor Nouman Ashraf. I have been working with him for 8 months now, and prior to that, I was a student who took his Leading Across Differences course in my undergrad. One thing that I have learned as a student consultant is the importance of creating a safe space. A safe space is where ideas and insights can be freely exchanged and challenged. It is also where students can feel comfortable abandoning their own comfort zone for opportunities to learn and grow. In order for the safe space to be present, there needs to be feedback. We need to make an explicit invitation for students' feedback. And by reflecting on those feedback and integrating them into the course, it allows us to enable a meaningful impact.
So I'm going to pause here for a second and ask you, what has landed for you? As you think about that, I don't want you to answer quite yet. I'm going to invite one of my current student consultants, the head, in fact, of my teaching team, Erin Sutsumoto, who has just graduated from the Rotman School just now. And Erin, I'm going to spotlight you. I'm going to get ready for this. And talk to us, please, about what you have learned and how this has been part of your learning journey as part of the MBA here at the Rotman School, and how this informs what you do next. Please and thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Erin Sutsumoto, and I think probably the biggest learning that I've had is understanding how, I've been a student of Nouman's, and I took his class last year. And even in this last year, we all know that teaching and learning has changed dramatically. And so I think the biggest thing that I've learned is, even though I'm a former student of this course, it's always evolving and we're looking for feedback from students. And in the work that I'm doing with Nouman is to go back to all of the students and say, what could have been better? What did you enjoy? What should we keep doing? What should we do differently? And everyone is so grateful and surprised, actually, that we're even coming back to ask for their feedback. And so having that and making sure that we're telling the students that their feedback matters has been a really transformative experience for me.
Great. Thank you, Erin. What's one thing you would do differently?
One thing I would do differently, I think it's kind of up to the student needs. I would like to continue, maybe I'll flip that on its head, is I would like to continue just garnering that feedback from students, because we can never assume that what they need is what they need. And so by understanding and looking more closely what their needs are, I think that's what we need to continue to do.
Thank you, Erin. I will remove the spotlight. And thank you. Cool. So now let me ask you, please and thank you, what has resonated with you from both the recorded student consultant narratives and the one that's been shared by Erin, very quickly? So Charlene, you've asked a question, which is actually exactly where I want to go next, but I'm going to leave some time for Q&A. So here's my kind of easy hacks. So to me, I think it begins with fostering meaningful connection. So when I recruit for student consultants, I look for those students that are looking for opportunities to grow their own personal and professional development in either teaching, in research, in applied research, in consulting. They have to have some kind of interest in connecting purpose, people, and process. And to me, it begins with dialogue. It begins with dialogue and saying, tell me what stayed with you from the course. Tell me how you would play a role in changing that. I also want to say to you, this takes a real commitment to student well-being. Just recognizing what else they have going on in their lives and showing up for them in a meaningful way so they feel heard, seen, and engaged. So working with them, not simply through them. It's important to have regular meetings. So before each session, we have a game plan, and there in the gallery, I'm facilitating teaching, and they have specific duties assigned to them. And afterwards, we have a debrief. To me, that's super important. But even more important than this is for everyone to have a personal, professional development plan. How is being part of the teaching team linked to where they want to go next? And to be in dialogue about what they know and what they're learning and how this is kind of hitting it for them. The most important skill, I would say to you, is this: listening intently. Listening intently, and everyone said this, right? I always say that feedback is data, not destiny. One more time. Feedback is data, not destiny. Feedback along the process, on the outcomes, on everything. Christine, you're asking me, Nana, you're asking, do I pay? Yes. So I have TA funds that I use, and I top them up with research funding that I have available on this. So to me, this is a practical way in which we can take the teacher as learner frame and make this tangible. I have 4 minutes. That means I just want to leave you with one more thing. And this is my final slide for you. My final slide for you is a model that I have developed in leadership development. And to me, this is at the crux of how I think about my work. And that's this. I have to be super clear. All leaders have to be super clear on what their aspiration is. And our aspiration is literally, how are we going to dent the universe in a way that only I can? My colleague and friend, Nilfer Merchant, calls this our onlyness, right? How do we embrace our onlyness? What's our onlyness? Our onlyness is the way in which we hold this space right now in a way that nobody else can. That's our onlyness. I think our onlyness is lost on us when we don't actually spend time thinking about where we have been and where we want to go. Our aspiration has to be linked to who we are in a way that is both self-aware and committed to self-actualization. Next, we're going to ask the question, what capacity do I have to build? I spoke about a capacity, listening intently, designing with, not for, creating the capacity to be vulnerable and honest and open about our fears, but also the capacity to reframe failure, not as the opposite of success, but as part of it. The ring in this avocado model that people really get lost on is opportunity, right? Opportunity. Most of us think about future opportunities, and I challenge that. I would say to you, think about the opportunities that exist right now in your immediate circles. To me, the most important resource for pedagogical innovation are my students. Learning from them, humbling myself to say, tell me how we can do this better. I would actually put Erin on the spot again. Something that her team, teaching team did this term that had not been done by any other teaching team before was they a session called Pate After Pate. Erin, talk to us. What is Pate After Party about? Your initiative.
Yeah, so I think something that we were seeing in the feedback from students was one of the weekly assignments was unclear to them, and in the instruction, maybe they found it a bit vague, and so they were worrying about what is it that the TAs are looking for when we're being graded or marked. And so one thing that we decided to do as a team was to invite them, not in class, but outside of class, and just among the 3 teaching team members and myself, that we invite the students in, they can talk about what they're struggling with, what their questions are, and provide more insight and clarity into what we were looking for when we were marking their assignments.
So Erin, I'm going to make this very open. So you had some concerns about the attendance, about how many people were coming. So in a class of 35, how many came on average?
Maybe 3 to 4 came on average.
I just want to put this out there, right? Not everything that you start at a prototype level will be super duper successful. I want to say to you, when I read the course evaluations that came out, of the 27 or so who actually filled the course evaluation, 11 of them mentioned the Party After Party initiative as being something that was so unique in the course and that they reflected upon as being part of how they felt engaged in the course. Thank you, Erin. So to me, when I think about capacity, right? Sorry, when I think about opportunity, you've got to think about what opportunities already exist right this second, as opposed to waiting for future ones. Lastly, it's about contribution. It doesn't matter what we claim as pedagogues. If we're not meeting learners where they need us to meet them, there's a suboptimal outcome that comes out of that. To me, an effective teacher is one who meets learners where they are and doesn't leave them where we found them once we're done with that interactive encounter that I call transformative learning. I also want to say to you that these models mean nothing if we don't have this additional behavior, and that is to have the courage. Closing out with Audre Lorde, who said, when I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I'm afraid. I've had a lot of experience here at the University of Toronto, but I'm a junior faculty member. But I don't let that impact or affect how I think about the world. I want to say to you that I'm proud of the fact that I have comma teaching stream at the end of my title. I'm proud of that because nothing is as pure for me as seeing an idea transform into meaningful, impactful behavior in the lives of those in whose service we do our work. So my final question for us is this. What are your questions? I want to thank again the CTSI team for enabling this conversation. And I'm going to stop share and invite Professor Allison Gibbs to engage in conversation. Allison.
Wow. There we go.
Oh.
Unmuted now? Perfect. So I would just started by saying, wow. Thank you so much, Nouman. I think everyone here knows now why I said how much I valued our interactions this year. And thank you. I feel like you've really brought us joy this morning. This was fun. This was invigorating. This was really thought-provoking, and really set the stage for us and the 3 days ahead. And as Jennifer said in the chat, this has really been a masterclass in teaching online. So thank you for that. And I think you've beautifully framed our thinking too with the symposium theme that we can take forward. And I, like Emmanuel, I've been, frantically taking notes because there's so many gems in here. And I'm looking at my list. I don't know which ones to pick out to talk to. Maybe the articulation of my goal of recognizing my privileges and not being a jerk is one that's really going to keep. And I mean, something I've thought about a lot, and I really appreciate the way you framed it, is discomfort and learning are linked. I often tell my students, and I get them to repeat it back to me, it's okay not to know. I mean, that's where we should be. And then what are we going to do with that is of course the next step. I'd like to give time for other people to focus and ask questions, but before I do, I might be a little bit selfish and ask one myself to kick it off, because you've got this expertise in leadership. Mm-hmm. And as you know, I have recently started a new leadership position as the director of CTSI. And I suppose, like many new leaders, I've been thinking a lot about how to have an impact. And I've been experiencing the internal struggle or tension between, okay, I'm in this position of responsibility now, I should have answers, to, well, wait, I'm the beginner here. I have this experienced, incredible staff. And that there's a wonder about how much vulnerability I can express. And I'm wondering about the connections you see here between considering the concepts of, taking on the beginner mindset and so on, and how that relates to instructors, how that relates to learners, how that relates to people taking on new leadership positions.
Cool, thank you. An article in the Harvard Business Review that I really like it's Jim Collins' article. It's quite old, but I like it because he puts together something that I think is an essential code, if you will, for all leaders. He calls it level 5 leadership, the combination of humility and fierce resolve. I love that framing, humility and fierce resolve. The humility to say, I have so much to learn from the Aarons, the Daniels, the Jung-Woos, the Alicias, the Taylors of the world. And at the same time, I have a resolve not simply to make this a gush session, very mushy, but to be in service of really finding ways in which I can use my agency, my privileges, in service of something bigger and better, right? So to me, I'd say to you that beginner mindset begins with that humility piece, which is to say, I have much to learn, but I also have a perspective worth hearing, an idea worth sharing, an understanding of leadership, and a vision that I have for my unit, your unit, which I, by the way, love, CTSI, right? To put forward. Adam Grant reminds us, who's a professor at Wharton, he says, argue like you're right and listen like you're wrong, right? Come in with a perspective. Come in and say, look, I have a view on this, and I do. And with my teaching team members, there are some non-negotiables, but I'm so interested in what their perspectives are. My colleague and friend, Professor Amy Edmondson, says the following. I love this, wait for this. 2 things I've learned from her that I just admire. She says, Nouman, first of all, the how we teach is the what we teach, right? Like if we are not present in a way, there are energy, our curiosity is contagious, then do you blame people for not showing up in class, for not being engaged? And the second thing she said is, it's really hard to learn if you know it all already. And it's true. Yeah. I think that the beginner mindset is really about saying there's much that I have to learn. And I just think that, particularly in this context, I want to say to you that self-compassion really matters, Allison, right? I don't know about you. You've started a job in the middle of a global pandemic, so you've probably not met all of your team members in person. They're my teaching team members who've not met each other in the current context, and so on and so forth. So I think that, self-compassion, saying we can get through this, I think it'd be really important for me to say, to really be self-compassionate, at the same time, say you have a perspective. There's a reason why you've been appointed to this. You are a 3M award-winning teacher, researcher. You have incredible skills to offer, and at the same time, your staff and others like ourselves have much to offer. Hope that's helpful.
Yeah, well, it is. And I was frantically scribbling things down again, because just even within that response, there were so many gems. But I think I'll how we teach is what we teach is so resonating. But the self-compassion piece as well, I truly appreciate. And I think that's something we all need to remember, right now and where we are with this pandemic. There's been so many great things put in the chat. So maybe
I want to pick one up from Nana. So Nana's asked me, could you tell us about one of your challenges that you learned from and not implement in your teaching? So Nana, can I ask you to turn your mic on, please?
Hi, Nouman. Great talk.
Now,
Yes, actually,
now, got it.
now,
Now
not.
Got it. Okay, that happens to us. Yeah. So I think that for me, and I just want to give complete credit to my teaching team members for this. I have been very fortunate to have had a really good set of learning experiences, including here at the University of Toronto. But my most important course that I ever took was at a university in the States in my freshman year. And that course was called Rhetoric and Reasoning. It was our ability to understand arguments, to break them apart, and to reconstitute new ones. I want to give full credit to my teaching team members for making me so sometimes painfully aware of the fact that I have a really clear, nonlinear thinking way about how things come together. Research question, research methodology, prototype, feedback, prototype, feedback, prototype, feedback, solution, feedback. It's not that obvious to everybody. And getting more clarity around expectations around deliverables, around how do we take ideas from the class, and they're super engaged in class, get a lot out of it, and then they feel once the professor's left, especially because they have an action research project with a community partner that goes on for 3 weeks after the class is done, breadcrumbs, or as I call them, croutons, along the way to completion. That's been one for me, right? So it's really, really important for me to be able to have done that. And I've learned that from active feedback from my students. I hope none of that's helpful to you. Is that helpful? To what extent is that helpful? Yes, no, maybe, kind of? Okay. Another question that's come here is, I really appreciate your commitment to student well-being and listening to students. I'm wondering how instructors can do that while taking into account all of the structural inequities that many of our students face. How can you attend to equity not only in your course design, but in thinking about students holistically, including their lives outside of the classroom? Thank you, Jennifer, for that amazing and important question. I want to say to you that a hungry student is an angry student. I want to say to you, a dispossessed student is one that is disengaged. I want to say to you that the forces of structural, systemic, and institutional exclusion do not park themselves out at our campus gates or the Zoom login or the BB Collaborate login. Systemic issues are real. I think what it takes is for us to really, really, really be mindful of that.